All right, so now we're going to have the MDM team on with us to share more about the latest with MDM data. So Sonia, I know that you're on. I believe Jill is as well. I'll hand it over to you guys to kick things off. I know you guys can go ahead and share your PowerPoint. And just as a reminder to the community, put your questions in the chat for us. I will read them aloud during the Q&A, and we'll have our session speakers answer them at that time. So Sonia, take it away.
Well, I'm going to start. Thanks. This is Jill Katz from the MDM team. We're very appreciative to be speaking at this year's data camp. So thank you for having us. I am the provider lead in SME for Master Data Management. And we also have Sandhya, who will be following me. If you want to go to the next screen, Sandhya, she is our data analytical lead and works with the MDM developer and maintainer from Next Phase Solution Services, Inc. So for today's agenda, we're going to walk you quickly through an overview of MDM. We presented at last year's data camp and walked through our presentation, but this year we're going to provide you with updates to our two data products, our MDM Provider Master Index and Share Provider Profile. And also we have another data product called our MPI Profile Table. So we're going to walk through a quick overview of those like we provided last year, but we want to really focus on what updates we have for you all this year. And those updates come in with some new tables to those items. So we'll have Sandhya walking through all of that, and then we'll bring attention to what some new data we have at this point in time coming into MDM. So with that, we'll get started with our initial overview. And master data management for the agency might be a little different from what folks might have understood master data management to mean outside of government. We here at the Master Data Management team are part of the enterprise shared services, and we link critical data from across the agency. And we're not producing what folks may think of as a golden record, which is having one particular record that brings together all the data. We learned at CMS that's not something we can do, as each component feels that their data that they have is potentially the golden record. So instead, we basically use an ID resolution tool to bring together this critical data from across the different components, and we consolidate that information. We are an authoritative system of reference because we are cross-referencing the data from across the agency from various operational information and pilot and demonstration systems of record. So therefore, our role here is really to ID resolve and integrate this data together. It's different domains of data, particularly around provider, beneficiary, organization data of domains around the different programs, Medicare and Medicaid to start with. We bring that information together and we produce what is called master indexes and share provider profiles. And then we allow this data to be accessible to folks around the agency for their own business needs, either through extracts, BI tools reporting through the CMS mainframe. We also have our data available in the Master Data Management Analytic Data Mart within the IDR, or the Integrated Data Repository for the agency. And more recently, the CMS Enterprise Data Lake Data Mesh. So with that, I'm going to move on to this slide. Thanks, Sandhya. So for what we want you guys to take away from today, if you would look at the bottom of this slide, ideally, we have various forms of data in different areas in the agency, and our data that we're accumulating is provider data within these two data products. We integrate it and we curate that through our ID resolution process. And we're combining both current and historical provider data from PACOS, and we're pretty much, PACOS data is dealing with the Medicare provider enrollment data, also from MPES, which is provider enumeration data, where the providers enumerate and get their MPI, our national provider identifiers. The TMSIS data, which is around the Medicaid providers. We have MPICS information as well, which is in the previous past of an MPI crosswalk, which is dealing with a lot more legacy information, and that system's been retired. as of June of 2018. And we actually got the last full data dump of picture of that information, of all that data, I should say, in MPICS before they retired it that same day. And then lastly, we have our KEYS data, which is a snapshot of really the facility information, hospitals, the skilled nursing facilities, as well as hospice information. So we bring all this information in through our ID resolution tool, which is Novetta. And in order to do that, we basically ID resolve with various algorithms. We profile our data from each new source system that we bring in. We learn the different hierarchies or data nuances within that data set itself. And then we are, through our ID resolution, allow this data to be integrated together with the other source systems of data we already have, so that everything is apples to apples when you're working with the information. We have this ability to integrate it and create this apples to apples kind of hierarchy as to what we call our MDM lean index. And that allows you to work with the tables and link the tables so that the data is at the same level and makes sense for when you're building your queries. Lastly, we have our provider master index, which brings about our demographic information, MPI information, name, address, about our providers. And then we have our shared provider profile data. That information is really more or less information from the PACO systems. It's payload information. It brings you additional information about our providers. And it's also bringing in information from TMSIS around the Medicaid arena. We have another data product above here called our MPI profile, which is a subset of our provider master index shared provider profile data. The provider master index shared provider profile data is a combination of both Medicare and Medicaid data. In our MPI profile tables, that is a subset, and it only contains the Medicare only data. We kind of make it easy for folks who don't necessarily want to work with the tables and understanding the nuances around the complexities of linking. To make it easier for folks, we allow you to link in the MPI profile, obviously, through the MPI. So once we have all this information available in both our MPI profiles as well as our PMI SPP tables, in order for you guys to be able to access that, there's various ways. We have right now migrated into the AWS cloud environment. So we are making this data available, the PMI SPP as well as the MPI profiles, in both the CMS Enterprise Data Lake on Data Mesh. We also have it available still in the Master Data Management Analytic Data Mart. And we also have some extracts that we are still producing, but we hope to be retiring all of our extracts by the end of next year. So with that, I'm going to turn this over to Sandhya so she can start walking you through part 2, go a little more in depth as to what tables we have in both the PMI SPP and the MPI profile, and what new tables we have and how you guys can work with this new information. And then again, lastly, we'll talk about what tables of information, when is it better to use the PMI SPP tables versus just using the MPI profile tables. And then we'll wrap things up with letting you know some of the newer data that we have coming forward into the PMI SPP and MPI profile tables. So with that, I'll turn it over to you, Sandhya.
Yep. Thank you, Jill. Yeah. So hello, everyone. Good afternoon. In today's session, we'll provide an overview of our MDM, PMI, SPP, and NPI profile tables. And we'll also go over the latest updates to our data products. Today we have provided data coming from different source systems. As Jill mentioned, we have data from PECOS and BES, KEYS, and TMSIS. And the data is integrated and curated into our PMI SPP data products. So we have around 200 provider data attributes, and these attributes of provider are split between two data sets. One is a PMI, which is provider master index, and SPP, which is shared provider profile. And the PMI contains the key attributes which identify a provider. And SPP tables contains the supplemental key data attributes. So, and we, as Jill mentioned, we also do ID resolution. So what that means is using our ID resolution tool, NEA, we perform inter and intra-source matching and merging of the providers using the provider data attributes. And we assign an entity ID, which can link a provider across source systems. And while working with different source systems, and each source systems has their own way of representing the reference data. So in MDM, we harmonize the reference data that is coming from different source system, we standardize, and we store that information in our common code reference table. So moving on. Okay. This diagram illustrates the logical view of our PMI table. So all the tables are linked using our provider lane index table, which is highlighted in yellow. So this is the provider lane index table is the central foundation table, which represents or reflects the levels at which each source system stores its attributes. And if you see MDM provider SK, so this is the primary column, which you will be seeing that in all the columns, and it has a foreign key relationships between the other tables. Moving on. So the next two slides explains a brief description about each table and the sources that each table has. Now coming to the shared provider profile. So the shared provider profile table has the supplemental key attributes, and each table represents data coming from single source. And the picture that you see here, similar to the PMI tables, it represents the view of SPP tables and how they are linked to our lane index table using MDM provider SK. And these are the descriptions and the sources that the data contain in this table. So the highlighted table, which are in yellow, so these are the new tables, which we'll be talking more in the upcoming slides. And these are the new additions to our MDM data products. The provider enrollment chain of ownership, provider enrollment contact, provider enrollment bar, and provider enrollment status reason. So we have come up with few use cases, and also in the subsequent slides, we'll show you how to query these tables and the use case that we have built. So working with the PMI SPP data products, especially for the comprehensive PMI SPP tables, a user should understand the levels of how the source system source the data in their source system. So for example, coming to the PECOS, the PECOS stores the attributes at different levels like PAC ID, enrollment ID, and NPI. So take an example like name information or the sanctions or legal actions. So that information is stored in PECOS at PAC ID level. In case of address or legacy or license, that information is stored at enrollment ID level. Similarly, in case of DMSs, which is our Medicaid data, so some information is stored at SSP ID level and location ID level. And NPES, we have a tracking ID level. So while working with the data sets or MDM comprehensive PMI, we always encourage users to understand this level of complexity so that it will be easy for the users to write the queries and get the accurate information. Now, in the part 2, we'll move on to the NPI profile tables. So NPI profile tables, they have Medicaid data currently, and there is no Medicaid data. So we have data coming from PECOS, NPES, and NPICS, and each table represents the data at NPI level. So what that means is, having an NPI, you can query any of the NPI profile table joining using an NPI as an identifier. And another thing which I want to bring to your attention is the difference between the comprehensive PMI SPP and NPI profiles is one thing is a common code table, using the common code reference table. So when working with the PMI SPP tables, comprehensive tables, the code and in order to get the code and descriptions of a particular record, you have to join with the common code table. But compared to NPI profile, the values and descriptions are already mentioned in the table, so there is no need to join the comprehensive table, common code table. And the NPI profile tables have both current and historical provider attributes. And one more thing I'd like to bring to attention is there's a lot of heavy lifting that was involved to create this NPI profile tables, especially when the data to represent for the reassignments of benefits, or to represent the NPI and TIN relationships like employer-employee relationships or reassignments or the self. So that level of complexity is already taken care by in the back end, and that table is readily available for you to use. Next, moving on. So NPI profile master table. So NPI profile table has a different set of tables like NPI name table, legacy table, and there is one table called NPI profile master table. So this table, it has one row per NPI. So what that means is it has the most currently available information for that provider that is coming from either PECOS or NPS, which is represented in one row. And if you don't need a historical information, or if you're not looking for the remaining information, so then I think this is one of the table. It's already one table you can get the information for an NPI. And yeah, okay. And moving on. So if you are looking to get more both current and historical information, or in case if you're looking for what is a legal business name along with the DBA doing business name for an organization for a provider, then I think we will recommend you to go to the specific table where you'll get more than both current and historical and the extra information for that particular provider. So the subsequent slides will give you the descriptions of each NPI profile table and the source it has. So now, while considering querying the NPI profile table, there are a few things that has to be kept in mind. So one thing is, since each table has both current and historical records, so while joining the NPI profile tables, like take an example of name table and the legacy table, if a provider has a current name and a historical name, and same provider with an NPI has a historical legacy ID and current, when you're trying to join with the NPI, there's a possibility of cross product. So while querying the NPI profiles or any such query, it's important for the user or analyst to know the right filters to be applied to get the accurate and the current results, the right results, right? And especially when you're joining our NPI profiles with the claims data, we always recommend you to use the date ranges so that the data set will be limited and you'll get the information faster. So now we learned about what is a PMI SPP tables and what are the NPI profile tables. Now, how to use, when to use comprehensive PMI tables versus NPI profile tables. If you have an NPI and are looking for a provider which is present in Medicare or NPS data, then you can directly go to our NPI profile tables. And in case if there is a providers where there is no NPI, or if you have a CCN as a source or any thin information, or in case of atypical providers where there is no NPI, then PMI SPP table is a right table to get the information. So moving on, this is the same thing that we are representing in this slide. So just giving a brief overview of what we have discussed earlier. So today we have around 7.5 million individual practitioners and organization providers that is coming from NPS, which are present in our PMI SPP NPI profile tables. And NPI profile master table, it has the most current row for a provider, and they also have the code values and descriptions already embedded in them, so you don't need to join the common code reference table. And also we have TIN and NPI relationships that are coming from PECOS and NPS table. And when to use the when to use our MDM comprehensive PMI SPP tables, in case if there is a typical providers, or if you don't have a NPI as an identifier to query the information for the provider like CCN, then PMI SPP comprehensive tables are the right choice. So now let's let's move on to query some of the use cases that were built based on the new tables. So first we'll talk about the change of ownership table, which we also call as CHOW. So CHOW is actually the information where there is an addition or a removal or a substitution of a partner in an organization or a corporation. Like if there is a merger to a provider, or any consolidation of two or more corporations into a corporation, that actually constitute to a CHOW information. And so in this table, you have information about a buyer NPI, the buyer information like NPI, buyer CCN, their name, address. It also has has seller NPI, CCN, and the name and address. Now, if you have a buyer NPI or a buyer CCN, so the query that was written on the left side is kind of give you an example of how to query our NPI chart table and get the seller information. And likewise, so in this query, we have the seller NPI, and we can get the information about the buyer in like a org name, DBA name, what type of change of ownership, or it's acquisition or merger. So all this information is available in our NPI chart table. Okay, now we'll talk about NPI, bar, and enrollment. So this use case where we are trying to get the enrollment status and if there are any bar associated to that enrollment. So for example, the bar prevents a provider to enroll into Medicare. It actually provides a reason and also the effective and end dates which was opposed to a provider. So in this query, we are trying to join based on the enrollment ID. If you have an enrollment ID and if you want to know the status of that enrollment, the latest status, and if there are any bar associated. So this is a sample query that you can use either based on, this query uses the enrollment, but if you have an NPI, you can substitute the enrollment with an NPI and you can use the query. So the next use case talks about enrollment status reason. So this is one of the new addition to our MDM data products. So when there is a change to enrollment status reason, and there is a reason that will be associated to that enrollment status. For example, if an enrollment is revoked or denied, so there will be more than one reason that is associated to that enrollment. So today, earlier in our MDM data products, we only used to have one reason code for an enrollment status reason change. By getting the enrollment status reason table, we will be able to display more than, if there is more than one reason code associated to enrollment status, that information is available. And the query that you see on the left side, it's an example of how to get that information, joining the enrollment status, which is the parent table, and the child table SPP enrollment reason data. So moving on, chain home address. So the chain home address, so this information is available in our PMI address table. So we have this table already, and this chain home address is new addition to this provider address table. So provider today, we have physical address information, billing, pay to, and mailing information. So the chain home address gives the correspondence information of that particular enrollment, of that particular back ID. So, and as I mentioned earlier, when we are working with the PMI data sets, it's very important for every user to understand how the data is stored and what is the source of the level of the record that is stored in MDM. And so that, for example, as I mentioned earlier, PAC ID, the name information or the sanction legal action are stored at PAC ID level. Similarly, the chain home address is actually stored at PAC ID level. So that's why you'll see the description is at PAC ID level. And since the data is only from PECOS, we have added the filter to get the data from PECOS. And if you have interest to know both current and historical information, so it is important to mention that it's a current or a historical. And this is a sample query which explains how to join a common core table when working with a PMI data product. So if you see that we have joined our common core reference table based on the SK, and since we are interested to know only on the chain home address, we added a filter to get only the chain home, and that's how we get the accurate results. The last use case is a provider enrollment contact. This was a table which was asked by a few of our users, and now it is available. And this enrollment contact table, it contains the contact for the person who can answer any questions about that enrollment application. And in this query, what we're trying to do is, like, if you have an enrollment or if you have any information on the enrollment, you can join the enrollment contact or SPP table along with the lien index table and get the information of that enrollment contact. So now moving on for the upcoming changes to MDM. So there are some use case or users who are requested to get the asking for the demographic information into MDM. So we recently we are working on getting the information from NPS, where like gender, race, ethnicity, and language, and that will be available in next month in mid of December in our comprehensive SPP table. And the same information we are representing in our NPI profile table, which will be available in early next year. Yep, I think that concludes our session, Rachel. Any questions?
Great,
Thank you, Sandhya.
I'll stop sharing.
I've been working to, I think, manage the chat session or the chat box. If anyone else has any questions, feel free to let us know now. We'll see if we can answer any questions real fast for you. And if anyone has questions they can think of after the fact, feel free to reach out to us at the MDM team at cms.hhs.gov email, and we'll be more than happy to respond to your emails accordingly. But thank you.
Great. Thank you both. We actually did receive 2 questions so far. I see we have a couple of minutes. First one was, this is from an iKeys user, and they were wondering if there was any exciting updates or planned updates to the iKeys system related to the MDM data, because I know they saw some iKeys referenced in your presentation. Do you have any information on that, Jill or Sonia?
No, we ingest our keys data directly from iKeys on a monthly basis, I believe, but there hasn't been too many changes. I'll let Sandhya respond. We are bringing some additional new data in. We have Chow information she's just walked through to some new tables we're bringing in. But in terms of any updates to the actual iKeys application or system itself, we are not familiar with any changes at this time.
Right. Yeah. Yes, Jill. So we are getting the iKeys information, and we have the CCN and bed type information available today along with the address. But apart from that, we don't have any other information from in our MDM data sets.
Okay. Thank you so much. I do have another question. I think we have time for one more. What does NPI stand for?
So NPI stands for National Provider Identifier. So when a provider enumerates into NPS, he will be giving an identifier to identify, and this is identifier that is used recently. If like a CCNs, right? So now like CCNs are legacy identifiers. Now NPI is the latest identifier that was issued by NPS enumeration system. If you want to add some more information to the NPI.
Yeah, I think Sandhya has basically shared exactly what that is. It's the key identifier when a provider enumerates. They go to the MPES system, and that's where they get their NPI from. It was originally a CCN or some Medicare identification number. There's different versions, an Oscar number originally before it became the NPI. That's now what's being used on claims, that a provider, when they go to enumerate, they get their NPI, and that's what they use on the claims to identify themselves as well.
Okay, great. Looking at the time, I see that we need to run into a quick break before our next session, but I see we did have a couple other questions. Don't worry, folks, we'll be working with the MDM team after this presentation to answer those remaining questions, and they will be posted out on that Confluence link that I sent you previously in the chat. And with that, I think that concludes our MDM session. So if we could set a timer for a 2-minute break, and then we are going to go into the notebook alternative session. So again, Jill and Sandhya, thank you very much.
Thank you. It was a pleasure, everyone.
Thank you.